Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of You Make Me Sick. Today, joined by a very, very special guest. We're joined by Dr. Adam Yala. Dr. Yala is an assistant professor of computational precision health at UC Berkeley and UCSF. His research focuses on developing machine learning methods for personalized medicine and translating them into clinical care. His previous research is focused on two areas: predicting future cancer risk and designing personalized screening policies. His breast cancer tool, Mirai, did I pronounce that correctly?
It's a valid way to pronounce it. I used to say Mirai.
Mirai? Mirai, all right, Mirai, has been tested at 43 hospitals from 14 different countries. Adams' tools now underlie prospective trials, and his research has been featured in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Boston Globe. He's also been published in a number of scientific journals, including the Journal of Radiology, Journal of Empirical Methods in Natural Language Processing, the Journal of Clinical Oncology, Nature Medicine, and the Journal of Breast Cancer Research. Dr. Yala got his undergrad, his master's, and his doctorate all from MIT. At MIT, he worked in the Jameel Clinic and the MIT CSAIL. He's here today to talk about not only his work, which is fantastic as far as cancer detection using AI, but also just to touch a little bit on artificial intelligence in healthcare, some of the boundaries that we see right now, some of the barriers that may be stopping AI from being introduced into healthcare, and some of the possibilities. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, I guess I'll kind of start with, artificial intelligence is pretty much everywhere. It's in almost all aspects of life right now. And for people who are listening, I think that sometimes there's some confusion as to what artificial intelligence is. And I was wondering if maybe you could explain exactly what's meant by AI and then how your work may utilize it a little bit differently than something compared to ChatGPT or Grok or Perplexity.
Yeah. So broadly, I define AI as a set of technologies that's designed to learn patterns. So I specify a behavior, which might be through data, like here is a mammogram. This person got cancer 5 years from now. That is a pattern in the data. Now find me a way to predict that pattern and replicate it. If you think of ChatGPT, like the analogy there is like I have language. What's the next sentence? What's the next word? And that's a very flexible set of concepts because the world is filled with a combination of data A, data B. Can you learn the mappings between them? In the way in which my work is different from what we often see in industry, we have a lot of work in industry that's like, how do you do something people already do, just maybe faster, maybe more consistently? Like, how do you automate known behavior? Uh, can be very valuable and has a lot of use cases in healthcare. A lot of what I spend time thinking on is how do you do things that humans can't do. So, like to go back to like example of cancer risk, like people can't look at the mammogram and say this person's gonna get cancer in 3 years, and here's a subtype. Like that's not a thing people can do, but there's a pattern in that data, and so developing technologies to kind of find it to make something useful out of it. And I think a lot about like how can we can come up with new kinds of workflows that are better than the ones that are there now to make outcomes better.
So, kind of with that, I'd like to touch on your work that you've done. So, you did some work at MIT and now at your own lab at UC Berkeley. Initially, I think it was a project called Sybil that you had worked on. And this was using kind of some of the information you were just talking about, getting a number of, I think it was CAT scans that you followed through. And by feeding that into an algorithm, see if they could predict out years in advance lung cancer, correct?
Yeah, so that that model was in I forget which year. It was a little bit after the breast cancer work, but the concept there is very similar. It's like so. Let's step back. Like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? In every screening program, there's kind of two things you want to do. You want to read the current scan well, and then you want to figure out when to get the next scan. Because if you read it well and it's cancer's already gigantic, it's already kind of too late. So you need to have like foresight to have known to get the scan when it was still small. And for that, you need to get the risk model. And that's what we're trying to do in lung cancer with the LDCTs.
And so, yeah, and let's talk about kind of your lung cancer research too. Sorry, your breast cancer research. So your current model that you use right now, it's actually being used in a lot of hospitals. I was kind of curious with regard to that. So it's a deep learning model, and I know that I think the study that I read, you had just a large amount of data you had to pull from. So I think a lot of people, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this when actually creating one of these deep learning models, just how much data you have, will that affect exactly how, I guess, how accurate the model will predict? So I think there were, was it 150,000 different, was it mammograms or CAT scans that you guys used?
Yeah, it's 150,000 mammograms.
So based on that, and you feed, would you need, I guess the question I'm trying to ask here, and maybe you can explain this too, is based on that, how well were you able to kind of create an algorithm or put it in an algorithm and predict cancer risk in the future based on that large a volume of mammograms?
Yeah, so it's easiest to understand these numbers in relative terms because like people don't have like a good baseline of like what is a good model versus a bad model. So I'll give you first raw numbers and we'll contextualize them. So normally the way we think about like cancer risk models, we use something called like ROC AUC as a metric. It's a number between 50 and 100. 50 is random, 100 is perfect. And what it means, like if someone's gonna get cancer, what are the odds you're gonna have a higher score than someone who's not gonna get cancer? That's its probability, 50 to 100. Uh, the state of the art and what's been like used nationally for a long time, like the national like NCCN guidelines, the ACR guidelines, or whatever, are all built on models that have an AUC of like 60. So like it's better than random, but like a little bit, you know, not very much, not a huge amount. I bet it's what we have today, and like because age by itself and breast density and these other kind of measures people use it just don't have all that much information. Uh, Mirai, the model that I proposed in that work that we've then validated a bunch of places now in these prospective trials, is like ballpark 75. Now there's still room to grow, and even though we use a lot of data, like we use data from like 50,000 patients, 150,000 mammograms, in the scheme of things, compared to the data that we generate in this country, it's nothing. Right? Like we take like what 40 million mammograms a year. Uh, and if you look at the way, like in deep learning, we talk a lot about overfitting. Like what's the performance in the training sets versus the kind of testing sets that you're generalizing to? Like the model is still like they could massively benefit from much more data than they have now. And so I think like we're still kind of in infancy of the space. We should be able to do much better than we are now.
And with the current, I know that you're in hospitals right now. With that data that you're collecting, I'm assuming that'll get fed back in and kind of help to just improve on your algorithm and Mirai right now, correct?
Uh, ish. So like so most of the data that exists is always data in the past because you don't just need to have the mammogram. You need to know like what happened to this person within the next 5 years. And so like let's say the trials that we're running, you're collecting like tens of thousands of new scans. You're getting high risk scores. You figure out who's going to get an MRI. For that data to be able to be used in the training pipeline will take like years, and it's a small fraction compared to all the data that's accumulated across the last couple of decades. So really, like the way to kind of scale data sets is more by getting more people on board because you want to get the last 10, 15 years of data, whereas the next month of data is like a drop in the bucket. You see what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. So just very, very small now, like you're saying, compared historically to all the data you can collect and pull from.
Yeah.
Uh, Another great thing about this study that was brought up, a lot of times, sometimes there are ethical concerns with using AI in healthcare that there's bias. And by bias, I mean uh, if you just have one population with the same geographic area, then there's a possibility that they're gonna be different, have different outcomes than somewhere else. But for this study, you guys actually geographically selected multiple hospitals in multiple geographic areas around the world, correct?
Yeah. It started off with a lot of cold emails, and some dear friends helped me out to like find more possible collaborators. I flew to Taiwan. I met Gigan Lin, who's a great collaborator at Chungam Memorial Hospital. So we did the validation there. I flew to Sweden, met Frederick Strand, who's a great collaborator. We validated at the Karolinska Institute. And we've since now validated across ballpark 40 hospitals from more than 14 countries. And what we're finding is that as you kind of go across, the things are working out of the box. So we know that the finding that we're finding, like the pattern that we learned, MGH mammograms, when we originally built the model, do generalize. They are general, which is good. But so it's kind of always two threads. It's like given the best technology you have today, how do we make it most useful? What are the trials we can run now? How can we deliver on the promise? And the other third to spend a lot of time thinking about like, okay, well, we didn't peak, in 2019. We can do better. And how do we build the next generation?
So, how did you guys come about when you first started theorizing what you could do using imaging? And this probably goes back to your days at MIT. Uh,
Mhm.
what was the initial kind of catalyst for, well, if we can incorporate artificial intelligence using historical radiographical data, what outcomes could we find? Could we help detect future cancers? Could AI find things on the radiographs that a radiologist would miss? Uh, like when you first started your work, what was kind of the initial thought process behind what you guys could actually create?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the I started working with breast cancer because of my PhD advisor Rugita's personal experience with cancer, and the idea of we could catch cancer better if we knew who's going to get it is not a novel idea that we just came up with. People have been thinking about this in one way or another since like the '60s, and like even in the '60s, people were saying, "Oh, there's this thing in the mammogram, like it looks a bit different if someone is going to be riskier versus not." And then eventually, like across decades and decades of work at 4 watts of breast density, they eventually hit like federalization in 2019. And like coming from the AI world, it's like, you go on Amazon and you can bet that like so many of the decisions you've made ever are influencing what's shown to you, your ranking and your ads and whatever. And like inside the healthcare machine, there's very little information used to say anything about anything. And every time we kind of look more deeply at a problem, like how we thought about risk, and you kind of quantify it and view as a prediction problem, you realize like there's just a lot of room to do better. Like even like one of the most important decisions we make right now is who do you screen in the first place before you even get the mammogram. What When should someone start getting a mammogram? That is a decision. That's a prediction problem, right? Like it's a true positive. If you give someone a mammogram, they eventually got cancer, so they caught it earlier. And it's a negative if you didn't give them a mammogram and they got cancer, so they get caught later, or you didn't give it, or you gave it to them and they never had cancer, right? It's a waste there because all you did was bother them. That's a classifier, right? You can value how well we predict that, and we only use age.
Which is, yeah, it's kind of a crude metric, you know?
We
Yeah.
know about people. Do we only know your age? Especially if you're like a patient of this hospital, you know so much more, and we don't use any of it. And so when I meet people who are like outside of screening guidelines, they're like before 40 and they have late stage breast cancer, like we could have done better for those people if we just built the right technologies. When you have people in
So,
screening that like still get late stage breast cancer, we still could have done better for those people who had the right technologies. And so there's a lot of room to do better. And like the deeper you go into it from a technology perspective, the more you're like the tools we have are crude. And even now, like with the best of AI we have now, like even now we still can't touch all of it because we have it actually really big. We have so much about people, we don't use it.
when you're feeding this information into your algorithm, like, is it just the radiographic image, or do you also have anything else? Have you thought about adding, if you could, it might be difficult to do, I don't know, but for each mammogram also have, lab work, history, do you have family breast cancer history, any kind of, I don't know, some people get genetic testing, any of that information, could that also be kind of added in, to your algorithm to help predict? Is that something you guys have thought about, or would that just be too much at this point?
Uh, we've looked into it, so that part is okay. So let's say you're combining the factors people know matter. So family history, questionnaires about like reproductive health, does the person breastfeed and whatever, like all this kind of like detailed questionnaire information. If you add that back to the image, it barely makes a difference. Like you go from 75 to 76, it's like it's not a big gap. And I think it's because the questionnaires themselves are too coarse. And we did some experiments. You can actually predict a lot of these factors from the image. So like if someone had children before, you can predict from the image. If someone breastfed before, you can predict from the image. Like there's a lot of things like that that are like readable from the mammogram. And so adding it back into this question doesn't really help. I think there's other stuff that we're not currently incorporating. That where the challenge of having all the data in the same place that's not currently there. That I think will be powerful. So we have this collaboration with some colleagues in Denmark, where we're building risk models, looking at like their entire health trajectory because they have these like big national registries to predict when someone should start screening, and that's like stuff is pretty good, and that is much better than things like age, and that should be more complementary to the mammogram. Like the classic epidemiological like questionnaire stuff, like that underlying the various cancer risk models, doesn't add all that much compared to just the image.
which is pretty impressive when you think about it, because you would think, even having a little bit history, I thought it would sway it a little bit more. But I guess just the radiographic image seems to be kind of where you're getting most of that data from. How, as compared to a radiologist who would read this, how well does the AI kind of detect it in comparison? And I'm sure I know, I think I read that you guys, I can't remember if it was this study or it might have been the Sybil study, that you actually, so you had like a radiologist kind of take a read as well, and you compared it with the AI read, and the AI read is it very close to what the radiologist would catch? Or they catch more things than the radiologist could catch?
Yeah, so in the lung cancer model is a little bit newer, and that one on so there's two questions. Right, one was like how do you find current cancer versus future cancer? Radiologists, as it is their part of their job, are pretty good at finding current cancer. At least the ones that are specialized and fellowship trained, etc. And in the evaluation that we did, Cybele was fairly close to that performance. And Mirai is not as good as a breast imaging radiologist, partially because they rely more on priors and stuff. Uh, that model's a little bit older. Today, you can get quite a bit closer to that than was possible when I first did this. When you try to understand future cancer, people can't really do this. It's something they're trying to do, but really they can't. That's why people came up with notions like breast density. And in there, like you do way better. And so like that's where the technology has been focused. Like the detection capability for both Mirai and Cyber, kind of like a ancillary add-on that kind of came out of the process. The core focus is understanding how do you understand who's going to get cancer, and therefore what can you do about it. Because that's how we were trying to change the workflow. We weren't trying to change how someone's reading it today. It's how do you schedule the next person so you're getting read at the best possible time. In the current phase, we're doing more of everything, right? So now we're also like trying to improve the workflow, help the person read it, make them more efficient, making better caching stuff. In addition to all these other kind of longer term components, but that's the newer generation of stuff.
Do you think that, so it's like you have, what I say, 14 different hospitals now are trialing your algorithm to detect breast cancer. Do you see a day where this is something that's going to be used just as kind of almost like the gold standard as far as predicting breast cancer in women? Uh, or is it something you feel is, is that years away? Is that something that could happen relatively soon?
The real challenge we face now is more. I mean, like, there's lots of protective trials that we're running, and I think there's a lot of stuff to learn clinically the best way to use these tools. And these things take time. Like, like you need to follow patients for years. You need to roll with consent. Like, there's no way to supercharge that stuff in speed. But the bottleneck to have this widely accessible is more regulatory than anything. So, the FDA does some weird, has some constraints. The way the law is written is that if a algorithm looks at an image, even if it's doing the same thing as what is currently not a device, it becomes a device. So the classical risk model that people use today that looks at like, density and whatever, which looks at an image in a way, but you enter the density yourself, that's not a device. And that's what's in the guidelines. Because you look at the image directly, that's a device now. And now it needs to have expensive filings, you need to have a commercial structure around it to make it feasible. And I think like that has been the major roadblock in order to have this more widely accessible. And we're thinking of ways to amortize that cost because it's hard to basically the commercial structure, which is only caused by the FDA, is hard. It means doing this in the open, free way that we wanted to do it becomes structurally impossible. Which means now we need to like lump it into a larger commercial thing, and we're thinking about the right way to do that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That's actually a question, because often when medications are first developed, it takes years. It could be almost 7 to 10 years of trials, and then just review, just to receive approval from the FDA. Are you looking at that kind of timeline for this type of technology? Do you think it'll be a shorter timeline? Have you ever? I mean, I'm assuming this is probably the first time you've had to go through this type or these types of steps dealing with federal regulations, incorporating AI into healthcare and getting it passed. Do you think it could take that long to actually implement this? As far as like
Uh,
that, almost up to a decade.
I think that is the default in healthcare today, and it is the grand challenge of one's work to make it not take that long, and to at least have the second model and the third model not take that long, and to get faster and faster. I mean, there's a lot of bottlenecks across the process. Like, risk models are used for many things, right? But like one thing we use them for is to say like who gets MRI. Finding the partnerships to even start those MRI trials took years. Now that we have them, it takes years to enroll patients and it takes years to follow them. And you're already approaching this kind of like to do the final trial readout. I think it will take closer to it's a couple of years from today, and in nets we'll have been thinking about this for at least 5 years. And we're super grateful to the partners that we found. BCRF is a fantastic sponsor, and like we'll not be able to do the study without them. But like at a system level, we can't have this happen for every time we have a new model. We need to have faster turnaround to get innovation helping people. And because even when we have that, it doesn't solve the FDA problem. Like the FDA does not even look at trials; it just looks at like other unrelated things. So like there's a lot of work to do across every axis. How do you make this thing financially sustainable so you can finance improving it and having accessible at scale and go through the regulatory fees they have to go across to make this widely available is is a grand challenge. In addition to generating the kind of evidence that we want to redesign the next generation of cancer guidelines.
Yeah, so your lab at UC Berkeley, you focus on three major themes just to provide customized care to cancer patients. I was wondering if you could explain kind of each of these themes and how they kind of work together with regard to actually that customization of care for patients with using your technology.
Yeah, so to give that kind of the motivation we want to make possible, there's a lot of problems in cancer. It'd be a lot easier if you just had foresight. What I mean by that is like, okay, if you knew who's getting a cancer at a particular point in time, it's easy what to do about it. You just don't know, and so you get all of these like advanced cancer stages. Uh, if you knew which therapy you're going to respond to, and this one's not going to work, easy. Is how do you generate that knowledge, and that kind of leads to kind of three classes of questions that our group works on. One I would broadly call improving predictive capacity. So I mentioned like before, like we think of screening guidelines, like people use their age. There's more than that out there, right? You could use like whole health trajectory, but real data we have on cancer patients is multiple gigabytes per person. That is way bigger than anything we know how to model in AI today. Even the big LLMs, they look at like 100,000 tokens. Patients have billions of tokens, and so like we need to do quite a bit better at understanding things at scale and super efficient models and to learn the dependencies and patterns across this really massive. So that leads to new work in like new kinds of neural network architectures, ways to learn more efficiently, and all kinds of stuff. How do you better deal with the fact that data is gigantic, and you don't have 100 billion people. You only have the people in the hospital that are actually there. So it's big in that the samples are really big, but you don't have that many patients. And how do you learn efficiently in that kind of regime? That's kind of one bucket to give you better. And the way you tell that worked is now you beat Mirai, you beat Cybele, you have treatment response models. Like you're better predicting the various things we care about in cancer. That's one piece, but it's not enough, right? Because if you just have that, you need to do something about it. And that's the second bucket of problem is like how do you make better decision making given this kind of predictors? I call that control. So how to design new kind of screening policies, treatment plans, and whatever. And the last bucket, because even if you have that, that's not enough because if you have a better predictor, you have better action, like a better guideline, people still can't use it. So the last bucket are called translation, and there we're working on like new concept of adaptive trial design, how to make trials more efficient because you get more many of them. What's the right kind of pipeline to kind of take this to the end consumer and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of the three broad buckets from prediction to control to translation. So it's a big spiel.
No, 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 no. It's actually you explained it really well, and I think that it's so personalization of care. I know that you were involved in another study. So where I work, we use Epic, which is a medical record health system. People come in, so you come to our emergency department, and you have a fever and a high heart rate, and your white blood cell count is high. It'll set up a red flag in our system just from those indicators that you might have a process called sepsis, so a whole body infection. It can be life threatening. Based on that, it'll trigger certain labs that need to be done. It'll notify a team of physicians. It'll notify the nurses on certain tasks that need to be done. And I'm pretty sure you worked on a project, and I don't know if it was using Epic, but there were a couple of health medical record systems, and you were trying to figure out which had a better predictor for sepsis based on just certain indicators or certain points of data. And I can't remember the study correctly if you had a better prediction with fewer points of data because it confounded the results, or if you had a better outcome with more points of data because it gave you more information. And if that was kind of, I'm trying to remember which was the better predictor for sepsis.
Yeah, so this is a collaboration with Stat News with Casey Ross, and what we were looking at is how do you even evaluate these predictors? So normally we like have these sepsis models. There's many of them. You get told like here's an AUC, here's a number, here's the sensitivity specificity of your model, and we wanted to test and show in that work is like does that number mean the same thing next year and the year after that? When you build something on the output of the health system, like you would, it's not a causal model. What I mean by that is like you do stuff because you know there's guidelines and you get told like, oh, for this, give them that. You have a workflow. That workflow generates data, and you learn from the outputs of that workflow the kind of data that's generated to predict who has sepsis. But if you change your workflow next year, the model can stop working because now you have totally different data that's linked to that kind of current outcome. Because you don't have like this like deep physiological understanding. You're kind of going off the correlates that are built through the healthcare system. What we showed, if you replicate something that's close to the epic sepsis model, regardless of the model size, and you built it in like 2012, then you ran it. It goes from an AUC of like 90 or something to 50 across like a 10-year period. And we did this with using the Mimic data set. And it was like in the beginning, like, oh, uh, Beth Israel bought another health center and they expanded and they added this and this is this change and this prescription order set change. And then you kind of like you just kind of see the numbers kind of slowly veer down. And it kind of shows an open challenge in this kind of like building models off the EHR, where unless you have like and everything that's not changing, right? Like meaning the way we collect their data is self informative. And if we're changing the way we collect the data, then the model might not mean the same thing anymore. So it always has to be retraining and like finding a new thing and consistently validating all this kind of stuff.
So it's on consistency essentially is what you're. So when you have so many things that change, your variables might change. The model probably gets worse at predicting. Is
Yeah,
that
because
am I
the
right in
pattern
saying
that
that?
is the 2012 pattern, not the 2022 pattern or the
Right.
2025.
So completely different from 10 years. Yeah. Which must be tough. Like from your standpoint, that must be a tough thing to try to correct when you're trying to, you know, trying to create the most I don't know efficient and accurate kind of algorithm.
I mean, you can try to find the stuff that's stable or that's not changing, and then model only those that will be more steady. But then you could lose out on the stuff that's changing but useful. And so it just puts you into a perspective. Like we kind of have the current mindset of like you build an algorithm once, it's done, put a bow on it, ship it out, you're done. Uh, for some classes of problems, like imaging, that can actually work because like you know, an X-ray is an X-ray is an X-ray. It's not changing all that much. It's not like we keep inventing new ribs. You know, like there's not a lot of change that's happening there.
Yeah.
Uh, the EHR stuff that's like the output of human workflows is not like that, and so it requires a different kind of framework where you're like building stuff all the time. And there's a model of like you know we have seasonal flu vaccines, and it's a little bit more like that because you don't have one flu vaccine. You solve all the flu. It's changing, and so is
So getting back to kind of the personalization of cancer plans, there was a recent article in Frontiers Oncology in 2023, and it discussed the use of AI to actually help develop cancer-fighting drugs by identifying tumor biomarkers. I don't know if you're familiar with this study or this type of emerging technology. And do you think this is something that could be actually incorporated or used in conjunction with, I guess this would kind of be past what Mirai would do because that's predictive ability. But for cancers, do you see AI helping to be able to treat tumors just by detecting biomarkers?
yeah. I mean, this isn't my area, but there's like a huge amount of excitement happening in the space. Uh, the drug discovery pipeline is long and complicated. There's a lot of steps within it, and any individual one of those links, you can imagine ways for AI to help. Like, if you have a target you're trying to hit, finding the molecule that will help you hit that target is more efficient than ever because you can build models to predict the mapping. There's many things like from the range of like better ways to do docking. How do these two things actually bind together or not? Given one thing, how will it fold in the first place? Like there's every part of that kind of spectrum from like target identification, which looks more like cisbio down to given a target, what do you do about it? Is getting more efficient. Now the fundamental challenges of like I found a target and maybe works on a mouse, maybe doesn't work on a person remains the same. I'm sure people are working on that too. So it's not like we've solved drugs. drugs are hard for the fundamental reason that we're not doing random trials on people. I mean, like if you find something like we're getting better at solving individual model systems faster, which is amazing, really important, and I'm glad people are working on it. And I have lots of friends working in different areas of this problem. I think it's gonna be super impactful. But the drug world is like a very complex one, and like let's say we get better at solving this petri dish and this one and this model system and whatever. It's good because then we can cross the bridges faster. But the fundamental challenge of like drugs and non-trivial remains true. But this is not. This is the. I'm a uh, passenger is the wrong word. I'm someone that's like ancillary to the field. I do some work in the space, some pharmas, and I think it's a fascinating space intellectually. I think it's a super exciting time to be in it. But it's not my main bread and butter.
No, yeah, and I mean, for me, I was just more curious about as far as the applications of AI. AI, it's for me, it can be pretty scary for some people. There's some people that predict it's going to be the end of humanity. What I will say is that if you look at the past century, with regard to healthcare anyway, there have been three public health measures that have really improved just overall lifespan and mortality. There was water sanitization, vaccine development, and then the invention of antibiotics. Do you think that AI might be instrumental as, and maybe even the next fourth, kind of could be the fourth kind of public health measure when it's implemented correctly to help save lives and just kind of preserve lives in general?
I think uh, it's not guaranteed, but it could be if we play our cards right. I think there's things like both on the innovation level and the systems level to make that possible. I mean, AI is and like a vaccine is a particular thing. A antibiotic is a particular thing, and it'll work for a particular set of things. AI is a broader, empowering technology, and so like it should help us shorten the gap of finding all the next steps and the right interventions from decades between to like much faster. So it should give us like 1,000 moonshot ideas rather than just one, and like that qualitative change in speed is what we're looking for, but it implies like the right investments, and we're not fully there. You know, like how much investment is there really in the health AI space at scale? Like, it's not that big, and there's a lot of like nonprofits that help support kind of like uh, AI bio. There's things like the Arc Institute. There's many things of this kind that have like very big, hundreds of GPUs coming together to better understand the genome. Similar kind of very big, expensive, bold plays in the more clinical delivery space are are hard to find. And like really, we're still in a space that's in its infancy that has a relatively little investment, and there's not like gigantic Google level financial players out of it. Like there's a lot of investment in the biotech sector, partially because we know farmers can do well. There's a proven model. If you can one like the tracks is there. I think in the health AI space, we're still in a formative stage to build the first major success stories that kind of prove the case and catalyze that investment. And really, right now, like we're still in like early days of this field. We have it in a society is relatively small. I mean, like, look at the mammogram case. Like the biggest models that are like academic and public are like 100,000. There's 40 million a year. Like, do we have big national efforts to put these things together? No. Hospitals barely share. The compute that's available, like I mean, like uh, pennies, pennies. We're playing small. We need to play bigger.
Which is, I mean, so there's plenty of room for growth then. As far as like AI's role in medical professions, so I'm a nurse. I work in a hospital. I've been doing it for over 20 years now. Uh, but AI is slowly being introduced into certain aspects. I was kind of wondering. I had a few questions regarding the possibility of AI's role just in future medical professions and just possibly your opinion. So telehealth is used widely now, especially when COVID started. It really became more popular, and it's pretty well accepted just for preliminary diagnosis of non-life threatening conditions. It still requires appointments. Appointments cost similar to in clinic visits. Do you see a day where AI could someday just be as effective as a telehealth visit by, and this is again for non-life threatening, you're calling because you have a cough and sneezing or you have a rash, where you could theoretically be talking to artificial intelligence, show them images, give them your symptoms, and they could help provide a diagnosis?
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, I'm sure plenty of people do this already. Now, does it work or not? Is it actually effective? It's TBD. But like people already do this kind of thing with the general purpose VLMs you have from the things like ChatGPT now. I think to catalyze a space and make it actually effective, you need to have like the same way that like if you get some very bad advice that's harmful from a clinician, there's like medical legal liability, and there's like a lot of stuff. There's a whole system around here to kind of like how do you do QC as a society of the quality of medical care. Our perfect system could get better, but there's a system, and I think it is a matter of time until the systems become mature enough that people are willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is to kind of take liability for errors and monetize it accordingly and do things to kind of make that kind of service available. I think the nature of the profession, like any profession, will change. I mean, I can tell, like, I code, like, computer science by training. What it's like for me to code now is so different than it was for me to code 5 years ago. It's like night and day. And like, and it would be hard. I mean, I could do it. I could code the way I used to, but I feel like a barbarian. It's like going
It'd
back
be
to the
less
stone.
efficient, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like it may even makes you think differently because like I'm more used to what the AI models can support now, and so I expect it to do particular things, and I kind of like, and it means that my net throughput can go much bigger, and like what I think my leverage is as an individual person building is much bigger. And I think it is an open challenge of how do we do this in care, because like the general situation we have in care is that we're always understaffed. Like you tell me when an appointment with anything, it takes forever. Like I'm trying to get an appointment right now. It's getting a month, and uh, there's an opportunity if you do well enough to make the system serve people better. I think it's an exciting opportunity, but again, it's definitely going to involve a lot of change. There's no way to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of as a follow up to that, like I was wondering, like just how much, like if you get to that point where it's relatively effective and efficient, it could definitely reduce like wait times in emergency departments. People wouldn't be going to the emergency department because they felt like they were sick or had the flu or something, or it wasn't overly pressing. Uh, the other thing, as you kind of brought up, like the insurance industry has always got their fingers in everything, and it's like as far as a cost saving measure, like at what point would it become more or less cost effective to do this? I think that all depends on like I said, who regulatory issues, all those things. Um, in hospitals in general. Oh, sorry, go right ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that like, can we make it technically possible to deliver this kind of care? For sure. Will we fail to deploy because of some weird nuance of our incentives and our insurance system? Maybe. To me, those are kind of different questions because the insurer does not necessarily have a great incentive to make care all that much cheaper. Because I usually think to help them increase the revenue is better for them, and like they have like the profit cap stuff. Like it's a quite complicated system. I think it's what I think like uh, I view it like it's ours to lose. Can we make this possible? Yes. Is there the feasibility of better care across almost every sector? The answer is yes. It's like, can we play the cards right enough to make it actually feasible and cost effective within our system? Can we change the system to remove the necessary roadblocks? That to me is like the societal challenge because we totally mess it up.
Oh, I'm sure we would. And there's a lot of people who wouldn't want that to happen in the first place because there's a lot of money to be lost.
Yeah.
With regard to that, so in hospitals, physicians who typically, once they reach a certain stage, once they're past their residency, essentially, they start to make pretty decent money. Um, but physicians, they diagnose, they prescribe treatments, they perform surgeries. They often spend little time with their patients in general. You might see a physician 5 to 10 minutes a day if you're actually in the hospital. As a cost saving measure, could hospitals at some point use AI in some of these aspects in care as far as the diagnosing and prescribing treatments or even surgeries? I have a question about surgeries and robotic surgery as well, but I'll get to that in a second. Uh, just as far as AI, could they replace physicians in a lot of these, even smaller hospitals that don't have the staff or don't feel like they can afford the physicians with regard to prescribing treatments or even just doing the assessments?
Uh, this will play out differently across different types of places. Like I think the solution when you're like 2 hours away from the next hospital will necessarily look different than it is if you're like in the city and the hospital is like a 15 minutes like bus ride away. So that'll be a little bit diverse. I think we're already seeing some version of this. Like I mean, people you spend like it's generally true. People are burnt out. You see too many patients for too little time. You don't have time to think about them as much as you want to. It's very hard. And the AI products that are getting the most traction is stuff like a bridge that's doing passive summarization. That'll give you back more time. And so I think like, will there be more and more of this where you can kind of delegate more and more responsibilities to more and more systems, so you can kind of have control over what you think about and spend your intellectual power where it's most needed. I think that's true. And like in places where you really can't get anyone, is that like basic safety better than Googling? Like I would hope so. So like I do think there's like room to grow there, but I think the implementation model will likely look very different in like very rural places like where I'm at right now compared to like SF.
And I guess that could be really advantageous. I know that a lot of kind of community hospitals they will use telehealth for specialists. So kind of in that same vein, if you're an hour, 2 hours away from a specialist and you need to talk to them right away, like I think that that's somewhere where AI might be able to come in and at least aid the physicians that are there in helping them make a diagnosis or provide the correct treatment. The question I had with robotic surgery, so there was an article in January of 2024 in the Journal of Robotic Surgery, and it highlighted the potential of AI use in robotic surgery. Uh, I know that some places are using a little bit of AI right now, but do you think that there's a future where AI guided robotic surgery could actually become a primary surgical tool in hospitals with regard to providing just more accurate surgery? I know that robots they have more dexterity than humans, get to smaller areas than humans. Do you see that as something that's a possibility in the future or that might happen?
Uh, I mean, I know the surgical robot companies are making a lot of progress. I mean, I think like there's different classes of improvements. Like one of them is it so good that it's fully autonomous? Or is it so good that it could make, because a bunch of people, like, okay, what makes a really great surgeon? They do a lot of surgeries. And some people are good at very specific, narrow type of surgeries that if you get at a general place, they will not be very good at because they don't do them that often. So you have much higher risk of complication. Can we upskill people at scale? There's a different version of this in radiology. There's a lot of general radiologists that read everything. Okay, well, how good are they then you're recognizing the rare subtype of cancer that occurs in 1 in 15,000 patients? Less compared to the one that's like specialized in just that. And I think there's a class of opportunities that to me is more like short term feasible of how do you upskill a broad swath of people to operate a higher quality bar, which is a different bar of performance than it is to say be fully autonomous. Like if you have a Tesla or one of these like self driving car companies or whatever, adaptive cruise control is pretty useful. It's pretty great. It changes how I drive on my like 8 hour journeys and whatever. And like the Tesla autopilot version thing is like what I actually not pay attention at all. No, but it like makes life better. And I think there's a lot of version of this across domains, including radiology and surgery. But it's a dangerous thing to predict any particular timeline of any of these things. Science takes what
Sure.
it takes the time that it takes. Uh,
Yeah, not trying to put you in an awkward position answering any of these. I want to pick your brain.
I think like the robotics world generally has a harder time because you have less demonstration data. In radiology, we see more of the full world. We don't see all of it, but we see more of the context digitally. Not everywhere records all the information and all the kind of dexterous motion, and so it's harder to like you don't have as much data for these robots to build on, and they tend to be very conservative by design, right? Because it only takes the robot messing up a couple times to get a lot of PR that can kind of shut down the company, and so they're necessarily conservative. But I think there's a lot of cool work happening in the control world. Like there's a lot of really cool companies being built right now in general robotics, and if they do well, then I think it's quite possible you get like richer capabilities in the medical side.
So, kind of getting back to the question I had prior to this, just with physicians as well as what they do, and I kind of brought up the fact they tend not to spend a lot of time with the patient themselves. It might be 5 to 10 minutes a day. They have a lot of patients to see. Conversely, nurses, which is the role that I do, the orders the physicians write, the treatments, we're the ones who actually perform those. We provide monitoring of the patients. We're often there for emotional support. Nursing itself is just kind of hallmarked by compassion and empathy. Do you see a day where AI, say, it becomes autonomous, and you have AI performing the tasks of humans, and you have robotic AI-driven robots essentially performing care? Do you ever see a day where they could reach the kind of emotional, those characteristics of empathy or sympathy? And beyond that, do you think people would actually be receptive to being taken care of by, fully autonomous robot nurse?
I I think like could an LLM write a better eye chart message than a person? Probably because people are busy, and the LLM can write you a big paragraph explaining all the details, and like that's very compassionate. And people are rushed, and like when you're, I don't know about you, but like me at my most stressed is not my is not my most elaborate to well thought out email that shows a lot of compassion and connection. Uh, when it comes to the point of seeing the person in the bedside, I have a hard time imagining that something kind of hits like this kind of weird pseudo synthetic thing. Like I don't know, like a metal box that's trying to look human would be more creepy than just a metal box. And there's only so much that can comfort you. But I like over phone. I think there's a lot of like it is already true. People like there's already been studies showing this where people rate LLM generated reports back as more compassionate and more patient than the ones written. Like there's been anti evidence here and there of that, which is not surprising. If you have 5 minutes versus like infinite GPU flops, you can write. You can write poetry. It's not that hard. But the actual like in person thing, like holding someone's hand, I think there's a deeply human thing there.
Which is good to know. I mean, it's so kind of with regard to that. So automation, I think a lot of people are kind of fearful of automation. It's something that is becoming just more and more prevalent. I think AI is getting better at kind of helping automation become more like humans. Uh, do you ever think that there'll be a day where most of the medical profession is completely just run by automation? Do you think that I know that you just said you can never really take the human component out, but do you think that humans will kind of be reduced in their capacity and what they do or have to do, or could they even that could be beneficial at some point because you're not doing the tasks that are taking up time away from more direct patient care or kind of providing better patient care?
I I the way I think of it is that we don't have nearly enough humans to care for people at the scale that we want. Like basically, like in supply and demand, the problem is that we don't have nearly enough supply. The demand is way way higher, and so we end up with a product that we give to patients that is much worse than it could be, both in terms of like the user experience of it and like sitting in the waiting room forever and the appointment never went to think it is, and like it's not the best commercial experience, let's just say, on average. And I think AI ideally will give us a lot more leverage to have the existing supply, which is hard, more reasonably meets demand, and have people that are very skilled be able to serve way more people and play where they have highest leverage. Uh, Now, it's true in theory that you could have such good tooling that like maybe you need less than existing supply. But I think we're just so far from existing supply. Like it's not like you get an appointment for a specialist same day. It's not in that world. Like we're just not. Like people drive hours, and like your turnaround time for a callback might be several weeks. It's we're in a very slow world, and like I think there's not enough of almost every specialized profession. Like, and there's always like, how do you get more nurses in the profession? How do you get more radiologists? How do you get this? And I think for the actual demand of people wanting to take on these professions that are hard and very noble, we can help them be able to be more effective. It's a positive view, right? Because like, how do you empower people to do more and better? But like, could we mess up and make the experience much worse and have it even more grinding? And even like, for sure, it's also possible. And to build it a particular way, it's going to be a spicy time.
So recently, there's a congressional representative named David Schweikert. He introduced a bill called HR 238, and this proposed that AI could actually prescribe medication under FDA and state approval. Uh, the argument towards this is that AI could actually help prevent medication errors, it improves efficiency, and that can help personalize treatment. Do you think that's a technology that's actually currently available, and do you think it would be capable? Do you think of performing that task, just as far as prescribing medication based on, say, a set of lab data or an assessment or some other information that's fed into a model?
I mean, I think if you take the word AI out of this, it would make sense. Let's say you have a test, you have a bacterial infection, give me broad spectrum antibiotics. Like, why do you have to sign an extra form? Like these things of like it's rotes. People do it over and over again. You see a thing, you do the thing. It's not like a fancy AI model. You have this kind of infection. Here's what I normally give you for it. Just get out of my way. I think makes sense. Like and so like I think there's probably low hanging fruit of that to streamline workflows in a way that feels obvious and low risk. Uh, Now there's more complicated scenarios of like you're an oncologist and you're figuring out which kind of chemo regimen to do, and you have all these toxicities and like is pallet count going up? Is it because it's responding or not responding? These kind of very subtle things. Uh, it's quite possible that we will kind of create more information and like make an easier decision than was possible before. It's something that we're working on. I think it's gonna be very exciting. But like I in the near term future to midterm, I don't see that kind of thing being fully automated unless it's a place where the standard is so bad that that automation is still an improvement. This is the thing about healthcare, like it's so diverse, and you have really high resource settings and such low resource settings. And so the way I think about automation fundamentally depends. If you don't have access to an oncologist, then yes, this thing that's maybe not as good as one is better than none.
Yeah.
But if you have one, then you should work to help make him better, and you shouldn't like deliver worse care. So how do you like help individual person and especially in the global health scenario when you have like one for every X thousand cancer patients, then like the way to think about the solution has to change.
So I think public perception too is something that there's ethical considerations and public perception when it comes to artificial intelligence in healthcare. Uh, there was a recent JAMA article. It was actually a commentary, and there was a survey, and they surveyed over 2,000 people, so not a huge sample size. But there was a lot of mixed trust in artificial intelligence role in healthcare. The scores were you could score 0 to 12, with 0 being like no confidence and 12 being confident in artificial intelligence role in healthcare, and the mean score was about 5.8. So people are kind of split as far as confidence level for artificial intelligence to kind of be incorporated in healthcare. Do you think there are measures that can be taken to just improve public trust or acceptance of AI? Do you think that's something that is going to take a long time to do?
Uh, One, I think it's a funny scale. I've never heard of a
0 to 12, yeah, I don't know.
but I think I don't take those numbers too seriously. I think people in general are very bad at estimating how they will feel about technology that's not there. So you ask people in the abstract, would you use a language model for this? Before ChatGPT came out, they were terribly predictive of how they use it today. Like fundamentally, like what builds trust, efficacy. Like if you ask me, I just think like if the tools really work, building trust is just a matter of actually delivering results that are actually very good, and like fundamentally like the experience of using the tool and how well it works is what drives it. And if someone could tell you, I felt this in my own work. People tell me like, oh, I don't know if we can trust what it means to have like an AI algorithm do cancer risk. I want an explanation, blah blah blah. Hospital validation 10 later, no one asks me that question anymore because it works. And like I think it's many things are the same way. Like many things are scary in the abstract, but in practice, if they're useful and you like them, then you're useful and you like them. If they're not useful,
Right.
nothing will make you make you want to use it.
And I think
Like
just the utility, if it's not useful, people are just going to stop using it anyway. It'll probably die off, I would assume. But
yeah, I think it's hard to have like precise conversations on this when the tool is abstract.
kind of following up with the ethical considerations of it. So the studies you've done, like I said, you had one that had over 150,000 scans, and it's kind of another crucial topic when talking about AI in healthcare. Is just patient privacy is huge. It's something that we take very seriously here in the United States. Uh, when you're using your AI models, what kind of safeguards are put into place to make sure that the information that you're putting into your algorithm to kind of come up with your just research data, how is that safeguarded from people trying to access that information or hack into it, or just security leaks in general?
Yeah, and these settings, I mean, like there's like all security is like an onion. There's like many layers of security that kind of like roll onto each other. So the kind of like the first layer is like we. It's not like we have like servers that are like sitting in an office that like you just kind of walk into and kind of like plug in a flash drive. This is a secure data center that's managed essentially by the hospital. I couldn't walk in there myself, even though I bought the servers. Or like so there's layers of physical and firewall constraints. That's like we even though the data we work on is we usually anonymize it before actually putting into the research workflow. Even though it is anonymized, we protect it as if it wasn't anonymized. And so it lives in a place that's PHI compliant, all the kind of standard IT security constraints accordingly. In order to touch any of it, first you have to have an IRB to say the risk of privacy leakage is low enough for the kind of game that you have. There's like minimal risk stuff, so you can actually do this kind of large scale stuff. So you have to get like ethical approval of the actual concept in itself. You have to go through regular trainings, both on the IT side and ethical training side. There's like a bunch of layers of stuff. Uh, And even if someone like hacked into UCSF and got access to our servers, the data is anonymized.
which is good. And I know that here in the U.S. we have a lot of regulatory oversight. Like you said, you have all these layers. Do you know if other countries or healthcare systems are kind of protecting privacy for patients with regard to just not just artificial intelligence, but kind of data gathering in general? Whereas the United States, are we a little more strict? I'm not even sure if you know.
I'm not. I'm not sure. On the privacy side, I usually defer to the privacy offers at the hospital system to follow their recommendations and rules. I do AI stuff. I have a lot of expertise within that world and how the use cases. Uh, the security world is its own infinite rabbit hole of stuff, and we have people that are good at it, so they can tell me what to do and we do it. uh, I think in terms of like the capability to build AI systems, like in health, where you have these privacy constraints, there are trade offs. Like in Europe, you have these national health systems, and in theory, you can actually build things across the country and get a scale that's hard to get in the US. Because in the US, we're very fragmented. So you could build something for all of Denmark or all of the UK using the NHS data, and that's cool. The downside in that system, I'm finding through kind of current collaborations, is that the investments in research is often quite a bit smaller. And so, I have a collaborator, they're using the resources Statistics Denmark. The GPUs they have access to is really quite limited and like quite a bit less than just my lab. And so, would you need to build these tools well? You need data and compute to live in the same place. And it's hard to find that almost anywhere. And this is part of the kind of general conversation of like we underinvest in health AI.
So beyond the ethics component too, you kind of just touched on this briefly, but there's always kind of like that fear of litigation and liability, uh, and it's almost a question of who'd be liable. Like, say that you incorporate AI into the healthcare system and it's used, and somebody gets injured. Who is actually, and this is just kind of a question. I don't even know if there's an answer or a correct answer for this. Like, who would be liable for it? Would it be the provider or the technology corporation or even just the programmer themselves who created the AI? And do you feel that the fear of liability is actually kind of a barrier to incorporating AI into more healthcare systems?
Uh, I think it's one of those things like it totally depends on the workflow. Let's say, like right now, we already use AI in radiology. Uh, we use it for dictation, right? You speak into the dictaphone, it generates the report. Now, if you sign off on a report and the thing misread your words and like it put a not when there shouldn't be a not, right? And you sign the report, that's on you. It's dictation software. It's the same way if you slip and you like hit the wrong part of the keyboard, that's on you. You sign the thing, you make sure it's there. And for many things where like you're signing off, it's clear what the responsibility is. Now, let's say you have an autonomous system that's taking the full decision and it is signing the report. Then the maker of the system needs to be liable, right? Because and it should be priced accordingly, and it should be able to put their money where their mouth is. It should have their own medical liability insurance, etc. So I think like for many cases, it's kind of straightforward. Like if I think the ambiguous circumstances are harder to come up with. I mean, I guess let's say someone's doing surgery, and the scalpel breaks. Then who's liable in that circumstance? I imagine it depends. Like, did it break within warranty? Or did it break after like 15 years of not being maintained and cleaned? Right? And like, I think there was things like what happens if it breaks in the kind of circumstances. But I think a lot of settings that we're imagining now, where it is a decision aid, is Google liable if it doesn't give you the best search results for the question that you have? No. Should it be? Probably not. Like, you don't have to use it. But like, if you're saying that's a diagnosis, what if Google refuses to turn one and that's a product they're selling you? They should be liable for that.
So, with regard to kind of AI, machine learning, and future research, I don't know if you can kind of share. Do you guys are you concentrating kind of everything with your lab right now, just working on Mirai, or do you have other projects on the pipeline? Or are there things you can or can't talk about with regard to future research?
We're broadly focusing on going bigger and broader. So both Mirai and Cybele are what I think of as like highly specialized point solutions, right? Like we're trying to solve one. one particular problems I deeply care about, and ones I want to get better at solving. Uh, and to me, the future of the space is solving more and more problems at once and having a broader set of capabilities. Uh, One, because it makes you more nimble and being able to address many potential issues within the workflow and kind of like being creative on how many types of things can you help in at the same time. But two, because it also amortizes the cost of translation and like regulatory. So like I imagine that the future of this commercially is going to be like you go for filings for like 400 conditions at the same time, because then it becomes more cost effective than doing them one at a time. And so like technically, like to give a more concrete answer, we're jointly modeling things across many cancers, many imaging modalities, trying to get a broader set of capabilities, including the ones we've already been solving. Because one, we think it'll make us better at solving every individual one of these things, because and every one of the things that by itself are too data constrained, together you have more data to play with, so there's more constraints on the model for have to learn better. And when it comes time to translate it out, translating one big model, going through one big filing, is easier than going through a dozen small models.
The technology is fantastic because it's. I know that I think you had done another. I was reading another research paper that you had done or worked on with regard to pancreatic cancer as well. And there are certain cancers, pancreatic cancer being one of them, as well as stomach cancer, that a lot of times you don't find malignancies until it's far too late. Pancreatic cancer, especially because it's got such a high mortality rate. If it's even if you catch it early, it's still just super deadly. But like stomach cancers as well, because people don't present with symptoms until you have a malignancy. And I don't know if the same, with the research you've done on Cybele and with Mirai, if that same type of technology can be used as well to help detect these other cancers.
Yeah, so there's the same type. We're working on two things for that problem. Uh, it's all the same flavor. Like once you have imaging, you know so much. You get to atomically see what's going on. You should be able to get better risk models. And so there's one flavor of work that we're working on. Like if you have a lot of incidental imaging, you got an abdomen CT for an unrelated reason. Kind of figure out your high risk now, so that like for those people who happen to have that imaging, we can do something useful for them. The other bucket, when you don't have imaging, how do I give you a better baseline prediction? And that's all this like EHR modeling stuff, which we already talked about before, has to always be evolving because the EHR is like this dynamic beast. And the future, I think, is both. We should model everything. I think like, there's been a lot of efforts that are more comp bio plays where you say like I'm going to invent a new panel, some new blood tests. Maybe I'll look for circular tumor DNA or something else. And those are great efforts, and I think they can be complementary. But the type of thing I'm most interested in is like what can we do with what's already widely collected? Because there you have scale. Then it's an AI play. If you're doing a new blood test and you have a new kind of panel, you're going to read these 4 things out or these 10 things out. And you're going to have maybe across as many years 100 samples or 300 samples. It's too small. I mean, it can be really valuable and that's great, but it's too small for my skill set and my what the type of stuff that my lab does to make the big difference. So we're very much focused like where can we operate at scale, where the type of technologies that we're really good at building can make the most difference. So it leads you to like imaging and EHR stuff that we've been collecting for decades, less than the kind of like new novel experimental platform that is by its nature new and small and limited adoption. There is room to make AI innovations there, but it's like a different flavor of work and it's quite a bit harder.
How hard has it been for you when you're kind of procuring data just to get, because you needed so much data for these models? Have you had difficulty finding just facilities or just just obtaining the medical records? And do you see that as kind of being another roadblock in the future when you're trying to do these other predictive models, is just actually getting access to the data that you need?
It is a major challenge. I mean, I think that we're not bad at it. I spend a lot of time on it. I don't know how, how hard is, as I say, it's hard enough to spend a lot of my time on it. And I think about it a lot. Uh, and it's so hard, I don't know how to compare it to anything else. Uh, so it's that level of hard. It's like tier one hard. Uh, and it's not just about finding other centers. It's like the kind of stuff that we're building and the level of which we're trying to pull data is like, I want every health system that's ever happened. I want everything. That's hard. That's not a button. That's not people have been asking for that for many years, and it's very easy to export everything in an easily available format. It takes a lot of time to pull it. Like the basic, even internally, the basic piping to download CTs, say at UCSF, is not that fast. It takes a lot of time, and we're spending a lot of time kind of like, okay, well, what's the best way to use this system as it is to kind of get the volume that we need? It's challenging internally, challenging externally, other places, and fundamentally because it's so laborious to get this thing working. It's based on relationships. Like not some random stranger who like does not care about the project or like what we're trying to achieve. Is going to go through all of the work to curate this data set for us. So you have to like find partners that believe in the mission, that you're aligned with, you're going to build something together, and willing to kind of go through the work with you to make it happen. And it's a burden of love. It's a burden of love.
Something another question, a lot of people don't realize that not everybody has digital records as well. So we still get a lot of outside hospitals that will send us images that are captured on like DVDs or CDs. And I don't know how it is because you've had collaborations just with other parts of the world. And I'm not sure as far as like digital radiographs, like a lot of places can upload them pretty quickly. You were just saying it takes a lot of time just to kind of actually get the information and then like download it into your system. Have you had trouble just getting just the type of media that the imaging comes on? Has that been a problem too, as far as integrating that? Not even
Yeah, I mean,
integrating, but just getting the data and being able to upload that.
it just helpful to think about the scale. Like moving 500 terabytes of images from one place to another, it's not that easy. Because like fundamentally you pull it from the clinical system. Well, clinical systems to do clinical stuff all day. So it has to slow down till you don't mess up clinical operations. And like moving that much thing when you don't have these like, fast links between places, it's just slow. And like and if people haven't done that kind of thing before, beating the pipes is challenging. Not at the patient level when someone wants to like uh, get a risk score or they're curious about the research, they want to try a model. Like fundamentally, like as a patient, you don't have like easy query access. People get CDs, and like uh, people sometimes mail me CDs. Uh, it's too challenging as a patient to get access to your data in a convenient format.
Yeah,
At the institutional level, that's not really the thing. Like PAC systems have APIs, but depending on the hospital that you're in, like you don't have the bulk export enabled in your PACS license. So they're going to squeeze you for more money. Or maybe you have it, but you don't have like an intermediate place to store 500 terabytes of storage. So it's like it's not trivial. It's not trivial because of the scale.
with regard to funding, so has it been difficult to kind of get funding, just as far as governmental, publicly, privately, however you procure funding for your research? And do you think that there's a way that you could, I don't know, hopefully this will help this podcast, depending on who takes a listen to it, kind of spread the word about what you're doing and how beneficial it can be and probably will be. Uh, how do you, have you found it hard to actually get funding for what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. Like you never have a baseline. You spend a lot of time on it. You work hard on it. It's all. I mean, like it is always challenging, and the cycle time that we have in the system is quite slow. So just today, I got my notice of award for the R01/R37 that I wrote. Very excited for that. That's gonna hopefully give us quite a bit of runway. I From the time of writing that, the first time I wrote it was June of 20 something, more than a year ago. I I think it was, yeah, it must have been June of 23. They had some comments. We revised it. The first time I could resubmit, given the revision, was February of 24. We did not receive that funding until today. Now, I'm super, like, I mean, the fact we have the NIH, there's nothing quite like it. It's an incredible resource. But, like, practically, the cycle time of, like, having an idea to having the resource to pursue that idea, median time is like 18 months. That's very slow in the pace of science. Because by the time that comes over, you have all these kind of new ideas, and like you just can't be very nimble. And that means that like it's hard to move quickly. And practically right now for our work, I can say for a fact the rate limiting factor is not ideas, it's not students building really great stuff, it's compute. And it's gonna remain that way for the foreseeable future. And so I think like as a lab leader, like what is my responsibility? Like I'm trying to both create things in the world of cancer, right? And like develop useful things for like, patients. And the best way for me to do that is to empower my team to do that. And resourcing and like getting compute is a huge part of that. And when anything that you do has like a minimum year plus kind of cycle time through the normal pathways, it's hard to be nimble. And I think there's a better system to be had. Uh, so it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. I think things have gone relatively well, uh, relatively, but compared to one's ambitions, compared to my ambitions, not enough. Though that's more dispositional than anything. Like I think I'm always trying to think of ways of like how can we move faster, how can we deliver faster. Like to me, the biggest risk of like is in 10 years, carrier's still the same. Like that is failure,
Yeah.
and the normal time for translating anything is super slow. And so like we need to find ways to be like faster, more aggressive, and kind of. And for now, compute is a limiting factor, and resourcing is a big part of the game.
A few kind of just AI questions in general. So I know that quantum computing is something I'm not a super technically savvy person, but I've read a little bit just about quantum computing and how it's supposed to might be a game changer as far as giving you more compute power and just kind of speeding everything up. I know that there are chips being processed right now, but how far in the future to see like quantum computing being able to be incorporated into artificial intelligence? And is that something that could help speed up the process of a lot of what you're doing?
Uh, I'm not sure. I have some friends that work in that space, and as far as I understand, I haven't seen any kind of like AI breakthroughs made conceivably possible by that. As far as I know, the type of stuff that quantum is really great for is like Shor's algorithm and stuff to kind of like factor primes and stuff, and uh, and there's already post quantum crypto algorithms that are out there. So I personally, and I know that like if you're doing quantum simulations and some type of molecular modeling, it's very useful. But in the kind of stuff that I do, it's hard. It's unknown. Uh, Maybe the technology comes around and it's great and it's awesome. That'd be cool. But I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel of that kind. I think more and more like we're getting the NVIDIA GPUs keep getting better and better, and like really, it's not a matter of technology does not exist. It's having the money to buy it and then doing stuff with it. Yeah.
Ah, this is kind of a ridiculous question, but are you familiar with kind of the simulation theory, and that we're just a part of a simulation? And if you are familiar with that, do you buy into the simulation theory?
Not. I mean, like, there's some things I think are like I don't even think about because they're not actionable. So like, from a probability standpoint, so if you believe this is true, like, I mean, it's plausible. If it's society's events, like you create a simulation, sure, I guess, why not? Then, like, if you take that premise and the odds of you being in a simulation environment, it's not higher because you don't know the probability density distribution, but like, it would be like believing you're in the center of the universe to say that like you are in the primal base reality or whatever. But like functionally, I like whatever, because if it is or it's not true, it changes nothing in life. So it's like there's many things of that kind. Uh, like another version of this is like if there is a god, his favorite number is some real number. There is an incountable infinite number of those real numbers. So no matter which of them you believe in, you're probably wrong. Because what are the odds that it's true? Like there's an infinite. Like, you can play these games where you can kind of like there's one of infinite possibilities, and because of infinite possibilities, it would be hubris to say that you're the one. Like you have no reason to believe that your infinite possibility is the one. But that's like saying I could be wrong about something. You can always be wrong about something. Whatever. Uh,
It's actually a great point of view. It's another question I had, and this is something that a lot of people theorize that eventually, when AI becomes kind of fully sentient, that there's something called the singularity that is going to happen. I don't know if you could like what your thoughts are on the singularity, and if you could even tell like our listeners what that means.
I There's concepts of like once you get to a particular level of capability, then the AI can improve itself at some exponential rate and is going to solve all things. And it's almost like a messianic kind of argument of like hockey stick goes up kind of thing. Uh, I think that it assumes something about cost. It basically assumes that there is no cost improvement, and that cost is not improving, is not increasing as well. And these things are like unbounded and restricted, which I think is probably an oversimplification. Like for example, like to build new chips, the cost of a fab costs like 2x more or something every single time. Uh, there's many like I'm skeptical of the concept that there is no fundamental trade off that you can actually say given existing resources have this hockey stick. Even if you had systems that were able to like buy new resources, it takes time to build a new power plant, and to create a new data center. There's time to like lay more bricks and like manufacture more chips. Like there's a bunch of physical time stuff there. And so the notion that you can get exponential growth having fixed constraints and fixed resources forever, right? So that's where you get the singularity thing, and now like you solve all these things. It like seems to me a bit bold. Like if you want to invent new drugs, you can put that shit in mice. Mice take time to grow. Like I just think like the oversimplification there is like to me feels like a stretch. Uh, will we get systems that will change the nature of labor? You would hope so. I mean, the internet did that, but then it sounds much less magical. So like, uh, will we have things that will disrupt, like, will like disrupt the way that we work, and cause a magical transformation that will be the biggest thing we remember of this century? I think so. Does it look like a sci-fi movie? I mean, what are the odds that the way we imagine it happens to be the way it's going to happen? It's continuous odds, so probably not. That's the
Do you ever have any fears that with AI that it's going to get to a point where it could become detrimental to humanity? Or do you think that we're, I would say smart enough or cautious enough that we'll take precautions developing AI that we don't have to worry about it, realizing that humans are actually the cause of all terrible things in this world, so it decides to destroy all humans. Do you think that, are you more optimistic or pessimistic towards the future?
uh, I'm. I think we'll both do harm and good, like we do with basically everything. And I think what's going to get more volatile with the good we can achieve is going to be more ambitious than we currently thought, and the bad we can achieve is going to be worse than we can currently think. And and it's going to happen through both. It's going to be this kind of like running balance between the two, and like it's hard to predict out what that world will be. The internet has done a huge amount of good. It's also done some harm. Like social media has done some good and it does some harm. And I think AI is what I'll call like a broad empowering technology that lets you do a lot of both. And I don't like to say that we would do to take a purely optimistic view would be utopian. That like we've exited human conflict. That seems unlikely. Uh, and to take a broadly pessimistic view would would be counter to the arc of like technological progress across the last like 80 years. But still, I view these things like I very much of the mode of like I have a particular AI problem I'm trying to solve. There's a class of things we're trying to do better. And if we execute poorly, we could do some harm. We're gonna try very hard not to. We're gonna try to build all the right systems to do so. We're also gonna be trying to driving towards like net better care. That's why you have to run trials, because not every trial succeeds. And that's the kind of name of the game. And the broader societal level, as a society, there's lots of weird stuff. You know, like and it's hard and like I have no claim on the wisdom to predict like how this will interact with geopolitics. Like, all this kind of stuff is like out of my lane.
Yeah. So, for anyone who's listening who might be curious about going into the field, just of programming or coding or just in AI in general, who has just kind of a fascination with it, what advice could you give them with pursuing that, as far as where they should go to school, what kind of material they should read to get involved, or just to learn more about artificial intelligence and the type of work that you do?
Like anything, you learn by doing, you learn by building. And I would say it's a better time to build it out than ever before. As an individual person trying to build something new, you have more leverage now than ever before. The tools are better, the resources are better, the compute, the raw hardware is better than ever before. And so, like, less reading, more building, you learn by doing. Now, if you want to do the kind of stuff that I do, then practically you need access to collaborators in a lab that has the right resources to kind of do that. And so, like, reach out to the faculty you're interested in working with and like try to find opportunities. There's opportunities in industry in addition to academia. But like fundamentally, someone wants to get into AI, build stuff. It is easier than ever. And because it's easier than ever to do something small, it means you can be more ambitious than ever to do something bigger. Like what two people working together can build today is like, 9 a day compared to 5 years ago. And it's going to continue feeling that way for the foreseeable future. And it's really cool. It's just, uh, yeah, it's cool to see. It's cool to see.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by. Do you have just a large language model that you prefer to use? Do you prefer to use ChatGPT or Perplexity or Grok, or is there one that people might not know about that is actually more useful than any of those?
It depends what you're doing. I mean, like, I use LMs a lot in like prototyping coding stuff. Not so much for research. I mean, like not so much research work stuff when I'm like trying to figure out new systems, data info thing. And both ChatGPT and like Claude are pretty good at that kind of thing. Practically, I like as an IDE, I use Cursor. Cursor is pretty great. I only use it for stuff that uh, where I can use it given kind of security compliance issues and whatever. But that's yeah. I think as a whole, like if you this is a different kind of coding that was possible before. Uh, and if you're doing something we don't like, for example, I don't build web apps anymore. I used to when I was an undergrad a long time ago. I don't really do it anymore for a variety of reasons. I needed one for a small prototype to test out a particular kind of workflow. And like 5 years ago, that would have taken so long. You have to like learn React and learn how to do npm packagement, like all this like little stuff. But like just like uh, it is much easier to kind of like bootstrap to minimum capability very quickly, especially when you don't know the library. So it's cool. I encourage more people to get in the game.
Yeah, I've never like I wouldn't know how to code. I is there so somebody like me who's never coded at all in their life, could they use one of these LLMs to actually would it help in teaching them, or would it just are you actually able to feed in kind of what you're looking for? And I'm just kind of curious as the process of coding. I understand the basis for it, uh, but how much could I, as someone who has no experience with it, use one of these LLMs to actually develop, say, a web page or I don't know. I think you said it was for app development, but
Yeah, for things that are well covered by the internet, there's like a billion tutorials how to build a web page out there. For that kind of thing, it really can, and like you could literally like copy and paste the error message back into the chat and have it tell it to fix it and over and over again until it works. For things that are easy, so like a web page is so well covered by the internet that like it's pretty straightforward. Uh, but it is not a panacea. It's not being good at coding. So like what it means, like if you're good, you just have so much more leverage. You can go so much further. But if you don't know what you're doing, then at some point it's gonna stop fixing it, and then you'll be stuck. And even guiding at the right thing, understanding what the error is, and whatever. It's still like as times get more competitive, the only defense is always just to be good. Right? That's always what it is. When times are good, you want to be excellent. When times are bad, you want to be excellent because resources are narrow or good. That's the only path that's out. And so there's no kind of panacea, but like it does mean minimal resourcing to build something is smaller than ever before. So you can be more ambitious. I think that's very cool. So I have to jump the next 2 minutes, unfortunately.
oh, sorry, man. Yeah, I will let you go. I just want to let you know. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to let our listeners know too. Uh, Look into Adam's research. It's excellent. I appreciate you and what you do. I've always thought people who especially have kind of just your drive, your ambition, and especially with your technical background going to MIT and now UC Berkeley, the fact that you use that to try and help other people is fantastic. I think it's a noble endeavor. There's a lot of people with that same kind of background who might try to be more profit seeking, but what you're doing, I find, is excellent. It's so helpful, and I have a lot of faith in your efforts that it's going to continue just to grow and just be completely successful. So, thank you very, very much for coming on. One last question: have you ever seen the television show Silicon Valley?
Uh, I've heard of it. I have not seen it.
If you, it's a great show. It's a comedy. It's on HBO. It aired from I don't know. I think it was like 2012 to 2014. I don't know. It's about a decade ago, but it involves it's all about living in Silicon Valley and just this is more about like app developers trying to get known. It's extremely funny though, so if you have a chance, check it out. Anyway, though, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Did you have anything else you want to tell our listeners? Anybody you want to kind of or where people can find your information?
Yeah, my uh, like most faculty, I maintain a website. I don't update it enough. Like also all other faculty, like in 20 years, I'll have the exact same photo I have now. But like adaml.org is my website, and if someone wants to reach me, then like my email's there. And if someone wants to either as a house hunter get involved in your own research in some way, hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate to just all the time you took. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, that can be reached through Gmail at Make Me Sick Pod, and I can also be found on Twitter or X at Make Me Sick Pod. Uh, Thank you again, Adam, very much for coming on. I appreciate the time. Remember, everybody, to wash your hands.
steady heart. He's cracking the future, standing tall, with data and dreams in his steady hands, building a world where hope expands. Dr. Yala's got the spark, a vision so bold. He's reading the answers in the patterns they hold. A glow in the cold, a map to uncover, guiding us closer, one life to recover. The cover, AI whispers beneath his gaze, turning shadows into rays. Breast cancer secrets he dares to see, giving strength to the scared, the lost, the weak. Dr. Yala's got the spark, a vision so bold. He's reading the answers in the patterns they hold. A glow in the cold, a map to uncover, guiding us closer, one life to recover. Dr. Yala's got the spark, a vision so bold. He's reading the answers in the patterns they hold. A glow in the cold, a map to uncover, guiding us closer, one life to recover. The zeros and ones, he's weaving the fight, a beacon of science in the darkest night, connecting the pieces, defying the shroud, lifting the silent, making us loud. AI whispers beneath his gaze, turning shadows into rays. Breast cancer secrets he dares to seek, giving strength to the scared, the lost, the weak. Dr. Yala's got the spark, a vision so bold. He's reading the answers in the patterns they hold. A glow in the cold, a map to uncover, guiding us closer, one life to recover. Dr. Yala's got the spark, a vision so bold. He's reading the answers in the patterns they hold. A glow in the cold, a map to uncover, guiding us closer, one life to recover. The zeros and ones, he's weaving a fight, a beacon of science in the darkest night, connecting the pieces, defying the shroud, lifting the silent, making us loud.
Glow of the midnight screen, soft hue, visions born, a dream breaks through. Dr. Yala works with steady hands, crafting hope from lines of commands. Mirai sees where shadows hide, a beacon of hope, a guiding light. Through tangled charts and pathways deep, it wakes a dream, it dares to leap. The lab hums low, the hours fade, a curious spark, progress made, mapping risks with data's grace, saving lives, a race they chase. Mirai sees where shadows hide, a beacon of hope, a guiding light. Through tangled charts and pathways deep, it wakes a dream, it dares to leap. The map hums low, the hours fade, a curious spark in progress made, mapping risks with data's grace, saving lives, a race they chase, a race they chase. just machines, but hearts that care. The team united, truths laid bare. Breast cancer's veil they strive to lift. With codes of love they craft a gift. The future whispers through the pain. The lab rewrites what had seemed plain. In every scan, a story's told, empowering